conversation. But for all the new friends, I'll give you a sense of who I am and my background, because I think it puts in perspective a lot of the work I've done and the priorities going forward. But thank you both, because I know this requires a lot of effort to pull something like this together, and it really means a lot to me, and it's very helpful. So who am I? Well, I'll start with the very beginning. I am one of two daughters of parents who met when they were graduate students at the University of California, Berkeley in the 1960s. Yay. Woo! My parents met when they were active in the civil rights movement.
Oh, wow.
So my sister Maya and I, who you know, we joke that we grew up surrounded by a bunch of adults who spent full time marching and shouting about this thing called justice. And of course, among the many heroes of that civil rights movement were the lawyers. Thurgood Marshall, Charles Hamilton Houston, Constance Baker Motley. These individuals who understood the skill of the profession of law to translate the passion from the streets to the courtrooms of our country. And the importance of doing that work in a way that would remind folks, as we know must constantly be done, remind folks of that promise we articulated in 1776, that we are all and should be treated as equals. So at a young age, I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. I went to Howard University, and then I came back home. I attended UC Hastings College of the Law. And right out of law school, I joined the Alameda County District Attorney's Office that has a reputation for being one of the best in the country, in large part because years before it had been led by Earl Warren. And during my tenure there, I personally prosecuted everything from low-level offenses to homicides. In 2003, I challenged the incumbent district attorney of San Francisco, believing that the work could be done better, and in particular, he had a very low conviction rate on domestic violence cases and crimes against children. And so I will tell you, in particular, our young leaders here. So I started out at, this guy was an incumbent district attorney. His nickname is KO because he was known as being a boxer who knocked people out. He comes from an old political family in San Francisco. It was in the second term. So when I decided I wanted to run, everyone looked at me and said, "You're never going to be able to beat him." And then they said to me, "Oh, it's not your turn." And they said, "Wait your turn." And they said, "Oh, nobody like you has done this before. And you guys are going to hear that in your lives. And here's what I'm going to tell you right now. Don't you listen when you hear that. Don't ever listen when somebody tells you that." So I didn't listen. But we did start out that election at a very healthy 6 points in the polls, which, for those of you who don't know what that means 6 out of 100. Well, I still didn't listen. And we won. And I was elected as the first woman district attorney of San Francisco and the first woman of color to be elected district attorney in the state of California. And then I was re-elected without opposition. In 2010, as many of you know, then I ran for Attorney General in California. That was a brutal race. I won, became the first woman elected Attorney General in California and the first person of color to be elected Attorney General in California. And I'm now in my second term and stand before you as a candidate for the United States Senate. And I share with you that background because, in particular, those two elements of my background, the circumstances of my birth, being a daughter of the civil rights movement, and my career as a prosecutor, have really informed the priorities that we've taken on and the priorities as I think as we go forward. And a lot of how I think about issues is also captured in a document that I file whenever I've done my work as a prosecutor. And I'll tell you, that document never reads the name of the victim versus the name of the defendant. It always reads the people versus the defendant. Because in our system of democracy and in our system of justice, we have rightly said, a harm against any one of us is a harm against all of us. And in particular, because we know that that harm is most often directed at some of the most voiceless and vulnerable among us. So when I stand here at this moment in time and then think about what it means to be a voice of the people, all people, I think we all know there are a lot of challenges facing us as a country. We know that if we've been watching what's going on in Cleveland. We know that when we hear rhetoric that seems to be at a fever pitch that is anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, look at what happened in Orlando. We know that we are facing a lot of challenges. But I will say I also do remain optimistic. and I would like to talk about a lot of those issues, whatever everyone would like to talk about, but I do remain optimistic. But I would like to specifically talk about two topics that you brought up, and that is one of the most recent civil rights battles that we have faced in our country around protecting and fighting for the fundamental right to marry. And I'd like to talk about children's issues. So, in terms of my background, like I said, listen, I grew up around people who were always fighting for equality. And throughout the course of my career, before I held elected office, and including the time I've held elected office, this issue about what must be done to protect and bring equality to all our brothers and sisters has always been an issue for me, an issue to fight for. And so on the issue of marriage in particular, I'll tell you, I was very proud to have participated in the first marriages that took place in California. So I'm going to just give you a little history. I had just been elected District Attorney of San Francisco in January of 2004. And that February, Valentine's weekend, I was actually on my way to Los Angeles. And I was on my way, and I got picked up by a little security detail. But I was watching on the television because, you see, the mayor of San Francisco, Gavin Newsom, together with the city attorney of San Francisco, Dennis Herrera, had decided that we in San Francisco were going to start marrying couples. So I was watching a little bit of on TV as I was heading to LA, and I said, you know, I got to go by City Hall before I go to the airport. I just got to go by City Hall. And I pulled up in front of City Hall. And I will tell you, there must be a law in physics that when you have in the same place a large number of people that are experiencing at the same time pure joy, that you can feel it. Like it changes the air and the environment. And so I pull up in front of City Hall, and it's this huge square block is what it covers. And wrapped around the block were all these families of every configuration you can imagine. Balloons, you know, elderly parents, children, you know, it just all with pure joy. And I jumped out the car, and I started walking up the steps, and then I'll never forget, it was the city assessor. She came down and she was like, Kamala, what are you doing here? And I was like, I had to see this. And she was like, I'm so glad you're here. And she grabs me, she says, we need more people to help perform the marriages. And I said, count me in. And I got sworn in, and I then performed marriages on that day, that historic weekend. And then, as we know, the court struck down our ability. We know that the voters of California passed Proposition 8, denying members of our family and community, equals among us, the fundamental right to marry. And then I was going through this race for Attorney General. And I will remind you also that in the general election, the opponent in that race was the elected district attorney of Los Angeles County. And he was very clear. If elected Attorney General, he would defend Prop 8. I was very clear, if elected Attorney General, I would refuse to defend Prop 8. And so, sure enough, the election happened, and then we won, and I refused to defend this patently unconstitutional law. And we ultimately won, and now everyone can marry. And but it highlights that experience for me. A number of things, including the fact that there is still so much in this country that we have to fight for, in terms of realizing and living our promise and our ideals. And so that's one of the reasons I'm running for the United States Senate. Because there are still so many battles to fight for our LGBT brothers and sisters, and for so many others, so many civil rights battles in front of us, including another issue that we as Californians have an outsized stake in the result of. That's the issue of immigration. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that for a moment. California has the largest number of immigrants of any state in the country, both documented and undocumented. There are as many as 12 million undocumented immigrants in the United States. What troubles me so is the rhetoric coming out of this presidential race, and has been going on for quite some time, that has conflated criminal justice policy with immigration policy, as though they are the same thing. They are not. These are two separate policy issues with their own variables and pathologies and problems and solutions. And yes, there will be that thankfully rare and all too tragic case, like the case that occurred in San Francisco where a young woman was killed, Kate Steinle. And there's no question, and the prosecutor in me says, when the evidence proves that guy guilty, lock him up for as long as we can. But it is irresponsible to suggest that we would craft public policy for 12 million people around our collective outrage around one man's conduct. Equally reprehensible is that this conversation and debate has taken place around this misinformed term, illegal alien. Now, I've seen some of the worst of crime. I have seen some of the worst of criminal behavior. An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal. And we have to correct course on this conversation in our country. And at its core, it is a civil rights issue. As a prosecutor, I can't tell you the number of times I have faced and dealt with a victim of anything from rape, a child molestation, to fraud, where the predator had convinced her or him, the victim, if you report this, it is you who will be treated as a criminal. That is not the sign of a civil society, that we would have whole populations of people living among us and in the shadows. We need leadership on issues like this. On the issue, and so that's another reason I'm running, because I believe that California has to have and provide some of the strongest leadership in the United States on this issue of what we must do to pass comprehensive immigration reform. On the issue of children. So, it's pretty simple for me. I mean, listen, I think that, for example, on criminal justice policy, for so long we have all been offered a false choice. That choice suggesting that on criminal justice policy you're either soft on crime or you're tough on crime. Instead of asking, are we smart on crime? Instead of looking at what the public health model has taught us. You want to deal with an epidemic, be it crime or health, the smartest, most effective, and cheapest way to address it is prevention first. If we're dealing with it in the emergency room or the prison system, much too expensive and far too late. We have to be smart on crime. In fact, I wrote a book back in 2008 that is, the title is Smart on Crime. You all can buy it for about $2.99 on Amazon. Knock yourselves out. So, when we think then about what it means to be smart on crime and understand that it is actually to lead with toughness to think about prevention instead of thinking it is tough if we promptly react. If we are to understand it's actually cheaper for us as taxpayers, then that requires that we focus on the needs of children during that phase of life we call childhood. We also have to admit that our society is a bit upside down on this issue. We've marginalized children's issues. You know, we've decided, well, if you're a parent or a woman, or you like cute, cuddly things, then you're focused on children, and then there are always the big issues, instead of understanding what the public health model has taught us. So, a long time ago, back when I was DA of San Francisco, on this point, there was a time where there was a bunch of homicides going on, and we had the normal reaction, which is let's put more cops on the street, let's think about gang intervention strategies. But I also said, hey, let's do an analysis. Somebody tell me who are our homicide victims who are under the age of 25? And the reason I asked the question is because we just had so many of them. Who are the homicide victims who are under the age of 25? Well, the data came back, and it included the fact that 94% were high school dropouts. Not surprising. When I went over to the school district, I learned that of the chronically and habitually truant students, up to 40% were elementary school students, missing 50, 60, up to 80 days of a 180-day school year.
Wow.
So when I became your Attorney General, I commissioned the first study ever in the state of California on this issue of elementary school truancy. And sure enough learned that up to 40% of our elementary school students, or kids who are truant, are elementary school students. I learned a few other things. An elementary school truant is 3 to 4 times likely to be a high school dropout. 82% of the prisoners in the United States are high school dropouts. An African American man who is a high school dropout and between the age of 30 and 34 is 2/3 likely to be in jail, have been in jail, or dead. I learned a few other things. The significance of 3rd grade reading level. If by the end of 3rd grade a child is not at 3rd grade reading level, they literally drop off. Because think about it, before 3rd grade, a child is learning how to read. Then comprehension kicks in, and they're reading to learn. If they've not learned how to read, they can't read to learn, so they drop off. Another fact, in our country, at the age of 3, a child who is being raised in a public assistance or low-income household has heard 30 million fewer words than a child being raised in a middle or upper income household. So when you look at these numbers, there are a couple of things that tells us, including this. Part of our analysis also discovered that the cost of high school dropouts, they cost us high school dropouts as taxpayers in California $46 billion a year because of the burden they place on our public safety, public health, and social services systems. High school dropouts are really expensive. So what I say everywhere I go, you don't have to care about children to care about children. If you care about why you have 3 padlocks on your front door, if you care about why you complain about paying taxes every year, you better care about children. And I will say that I think that we are so upside down in this country on that point, but everyone has to realize. And we also have to admit another thing. You know, we're a society that pretends to care about education, but not so much the education of other people's children. Let's deal with that. And let's have leadership in our country that understands that we need to focus on these issues. And you don't have to care about a child to do that.
That's right.
But it has to be a priority. So this is one of the other reasons I'm running for Senate. I think we need more leadership that is national at the highest levels of our government, understanding the connection. And so I'm going to close my comments by saying a couple of things. I think that sometimes when we are critical of what's not working in our country, some people would suggest that that invites a question about one's love of country. I reject that notion. I say that there are 2 definitions of what it means to be a patriot. There is the definition that suggests you defend your country whatever it does. And then there is the kind of patriot I believe us all to be. The kind that will fight each and every day for the ideals of our country. And that's what this race is about. And I'll also say this. I think that the events of the last month, coupled with what we are hearing and seeing out of Cleveland, have given us all a real good reason to be depressed, to be sad, to feel pain. But I want to remind us of something, and I'm going to paraphrase, that Coretta Scott King said years ago. And she said, the fight for civil rights must be fought and won with each generation. And I think she had 2 points she was making there. The first being, it is the very nature of the fight for civil rights that whatever gains we make will not be permanent. It's the nature of it. And I think the second point then is an admonition, knowing it's the nature of it. Do not be dispirited. Don't throw up our hands when it's time to roll up our sleeves. Right? You know, your nails grow, you don't say, oh my goodness, my nails are growing, you just cut them. Right? It's the very nature of it all. So let's not be dispirited. I remain very optimistic. understanding there are challenges ahead, I remain very optimistic. So with that, I would love to take questions. Thank you. How's everyone doing? How you feeling?
I have a question.
Yes.
No matter what the makeup of the Senate will be after this election round, what do you think you need to bring to DC that's different from California?
Well, you know, I mean, this is where I'm gonna kind of unveil my bravado about what it means to be a Californian. I still believe, I think we all do, in that old adage, so goes California, goes the rest of the country. I strongly believe that. I see it in so many ways. I see it in terms of what we did in terms of fighting for equal rights in terms of marriage. I see it in terms of what we've been doing in California around criminal justice reform. I see it in terms of what we have done in terms of having the toughest laws of any state in protection of our environment and to combat greenhouse gas emissions and climate change. So I believe that we are a state that has defined itself, and we actually self-identify as being a place where innovation occurs, where creativity, I mean, look at all the work, right, that is happening here, right here in Los Angeles, all the work that is happening in Silicon Valley. We are a state that believes in seeing things as they can be, unburdened by what has been. And so there is that. There is also, I believe, and this is another fact that must be acknowledged, that when we walk in a room representing California, people pay attention. And also coming from California, and walking into, God willing, knock wood, coming into California as a United States, from California as a United States Senator, means having the voice of 38 million people plus behind you. We are now the 6th largest economy in the world, guys, right? And I know this from the work I did back when I was the district attorney of San Francisco, being the attorney general of California. I know the kind of power that we can have. That includes the bully pulpit that we have. At any moment in time, I can have a bouquet of microphones in front of me. And hopefully that then becomes an opportunity and a responsibility to elevate public discourse, right? And to educate the public on issues that must be discussed and thought about. So I think there's that. I also think that we know how to identify false choices and then articulate that in a way that actually makes sense and resonates. And also, just doing the work that I've done as a prosecutor. I have learned a number of things, including this. Most people have everything in common than what separates them. We all, no matter, I've never seen a robber that went up to his victim and said, "Hey, you a Democrat or Republican?" Right? And I have campaigned for myself and many other people. I've stood in many living rooms. I've stood in many town halls. I've talked with many people up and down our state, which is a microcosm of the country, by the way. It's a beautiful, phenomenal state in its diversity on every level. Most people, when you sit down and you talk with them eye to eye, they want to know that they're going to be able to have and keep a job, that if they work hard and they play by the rules, they can have a home, that they can retire with dignity, that their children will be safe and have a meaningful path towards getting an education and going to college. Like basic stuff. And I think that's where we have to go in talking with people. So, it's a great question, you guys. Thank you. Yes?
Your advocacy for keeping homeowners in their houses with the mortgage crisis and what you're doing with Morgan Stanley and all that sort of thing is very large on my agenda as well.
Great.
But I'm curious to know if there's anything that can be done with the possible repeal of Proposition 13 for homeowners, which is very frightening for all of us. And I'm in the real estate business, which is extremely frightening, but we're all homeowners. And that's, that is really, really being pushed.
I don't see see any, I know that there is advocacy for it. I don't actually see any political will or capital behind it. It's just because it's such a hot issue, meaning controversial politically. And so I don't see it happening. I think that if there's going to be any movement, it'll be around commercial properties, but not residential properties. But I actually don't see it happening right now.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, a lot of things come across our desks that are
Yeah.
talking about the repeal
Yeah.
and the
Yeah,
push
I-
for the repeal.
yeah.
And
I mean, you can just look at even just what's going to be on the ballot this November. There's nothing that's really in that zone in terms of topic and subject matter. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more question.
I have like 1,000 policy questions for you, but I actually want to ask you a personality question.
Okay.
I was living in San Francisco in 2002 and 3 when you started, and that
Oh,
was when I
wow.
first came to know you. So when you look at going to Washington, which I
Yes,
think you
not
will be,
would, yes.
no, you'll be going, I think, and you look at your colleagues that you'll be working with, and a lot of them have been on television this week,
Yeah.
Mr. McConnell, Mr. Cruz. I'm curious as to what your approach will be in the face of that,
Yeah.
and how you will move the eloquent agenda that you've
Yeah.
laid out tonight
Yeah.
forward
Yeah.
with that environment.
I mean, it does appear to be quite toxic. I agree. I agree with you. You know, I'll tell you what I've done that provides for me at least some blueprint. You know, part of it is deconstructing issues in a way that we can remove as much as possible the ideological interpretation of the issue, and then just get into the practical realities. I mean, I'm a huge believer in data. I am obsessed with the need for adoption of technology by government, which allows us to then have the tools when we adopt it, like we've done at the California Department of Justice, reveal data like we've done around criminal justice data in a way that takes away the antidote and emotion from the policy priorities. And so there is that thing, which is we just need to we have the tools now with data because of technology that we've not had before. And once you start looking at the numbers, then I think that we have to be guided in the way that our friends, successful friends in the private sector are guided. You know, I love my friends in the private sector. They are cold-blooded. Cold-blooded in their analysis of their effectiveness. Completely unburdened by ideology. Their question about their own effectiveness is captured in 3 letters. ROI. What is the return on the investment? Application of metrics to their analysis of effectiveness. Data can help us do that. So that's one piece of it in terms of just a tool, right? And an agenda that I have that is not so secret of an agenda, but is an agenda. The other piece of it is that there has to be a discussion about also looking at, I tend to look at issues in conflict through the lens of a Venn diagram, right? Remember what a Venn diagram, you know, the 3 circles, right? And each being as an area, and then that area in the middle is always ripe for expansion. And those 3 circles will never completely overlap, but that area in the middle is always ripe for expansion. And so I tend to look at things that way. And then there is another piece of it, which is just about not only having goodwill and perhaps good ideas and working hard, but also being politically shrewd. Because I'm not going to pretend to be naive about what is involved. And it's about using your leverage and your capital to get things done. You know, and that's on a number of levels. You know, when I was dealing with the mortgage crisis and the foreclosure crisis in California, after battling with the 5 big banks, and it was very controversial, I removed California from the national discussion. I took hits from everyone, from the LA Times, from everyone. What is she doing? She should have taken what the banks were offering. And I said, no, it was crumbs on the table, $2 to $4 billion. Sounds like a lot of money, but I did the math, and it actually wouldn't have met the needs of the homeowners of California. We ended up getting $20 billion back, which is great. But so then we wrote a package of legislation, because the terms of the deal only lasted for 3 years, and I wanted to make it permanent for California homeowners. So we've got this legislation, 6 bills. We called it the California Homeowner Bill of Rights. And I'm just whistling a happy tune with my 6 little bills going up to Sacramento. Everyone's gonna be on board. And they basically shut the door in my face and said, this is dead on arrival. You will not get, people have tried to do this for years. The interest and the special interest are too powerful. And sure enough, I started meeting with legislators, and they just, I mean, they wouldn't listen to reason. I said, your constituents are losing their homes. Like the people in your district wouldn't listen and listen. And part of what we did to eventually pass it is I said, fine, got it. I'm gonna take it to the streets. And we started a whole public education campaign that included letting people know how the vote or lack of vote in their state capital would impact their lives. It's about having political capital, and that means also doing politics in a smart way, which is, in my opinion, one of the smartest ways you do politics is coalition building. Again, based on that point that we all have so much more in common than that which separates us. And so that's about smart politics. You know, smart politics is understanding, you know, and this is a crude reality of going into the United States Senate. We need to win this race, not with a whimper. Because I'm just speaking honest.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because you got to go in there with capital. And so people say, oh, bleep, I need to deal with her. You know, I mean, part of it, again, not would we win, is I'm going to be saying to all my friends and my neighbors, hey, you know when all these candidates from outside of the state come in and start asking you for checks? You know what California donors do? They write the check and they give it to these people from all over the country. They say, have a great trip. No! You should be saying, are you voting with my representatives around what we need in California? Or what our priorities are? You know, and so there are many layers to this, and it is, you know, at its core, I believe the most important thing is it is about having honest purpose and intention in terms of what you want to do that will actually benefit the people, all people. So.
Thank you. You riled us all up, including the dogs.
I know, where are they?
So, and thank you, and you know, look, everyone's here, we have to get the message out, because what you said really resonated. You can't win with a whimper. You're gonna win, we think.
Yes.
She just got the endorsement of President Obama,
President
Biden, Elizabeth Warren.
Elizabeth Warren.
She's pretty cool.
Cory Booker,
Cory Booker.
Kirsten Gillibrand. We're doing, it's good so
Doing
far,
great.
so good. 111 days to go. I am counting. Or 110 days to go.
And by sending people like Kamala Harris, and really, we just care about you, to Washington, we're sending a huge message, because this is a defining moment for us. We all know this. There's a lot of toxicity in this country. There's what's going on in Cleveland right now, and Trump and all of that. We have to decide what kind of people we want to be.
That's right.
And that's the people who are going to lead us and represent us. And you're it. You're who we are as Californians.
A lot of people.
So yeah, get the word out. Tell your friends you
Yes,
were here.
please.
You met her. How amazing she is. Donate. Get your friends to donate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody. Thank you.